Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mainstream Indie Music Podcast. And we have a special for this week. And before we begin, I just wanted to give a special shout out to all of you subscribers, you 472. It means so much to me. It's crazy to think we are close to 500 subscribers. I just never think I deserve it. And I'm just very appreciative of all the support that you guys give me. I apologize, too, because in the background right now, they turned on the tornado sirens where I live, which is very weird because it's not windy at all here, and I don't know. I remember growing up here, tornadoes are very common, so that's why I'm not freaking out. And when I was a kid, they would only turn them on when literally Armageddon's happening outside. I understand maybe it's a precaution. They kind of just want to encourage people to get inside because it is supposed to storm very badly tonight. But I think it's just kind of odd. So I apologize if in this recording, because of course this is when I always record my videos is right now. Tornado sirens might be going off in the background. Actually, I think they're turning them off. Anyway, this week on our episode, we are talking about LCD Soundsystem. I almost feel like this is an Avengers style episodes that I'm leading up to because pretty soon I'm going to be making a video about the early 2000s New York indie rock scene because so many bands, specifically about 5 bands, came up around the same time in New York City, and LCD Soundsystem is one of them that we're going to be talking about. So, who is LCD Soundsystem and why are they important to the indie rock scene, you might ask yourself? Well, they were formed in New York City. They were in Brooklyn. And James Murphy is the front man, the lead singer, and kind of the brains behind the band. They were formed around 2002. Now, when you hear the word LCD Soundsystem, you might think of Liquid Crystal Display, of course, but it's not. It actually stands for Liquid Christmas Display. It was kind of based off of a Christmas party, and they would cover songs. And it's just kind of a play on words. Everyone thinks of the actual meaning of LCD Soundsystem, but that's not what it is. But right away, James and his band, they kind of knew that they had something special. They wanted to get started right away. And so they began by releasing a string of singles under indie rock label, DFA Records, which was actually co-founded by James himself. Their first single is called Losing My Edge. You're going to see LCD Soundsystem, James and the rest of his bandmates, they have a pattern going on of they just perform and they do what they want to, what makes them happy. Losing My Edge is a good example because it is 8 minutes long and it just has this simple kind of dirty electronic beat and the lyrics are funny, the message is funny, but it was a huge dance hit during that time, especially in the underground. And so in 2005 now, kind of fast forwarding a few years later, they decide that they're ready. They make their debut studio album, which was self-titled. And the single, one of the first singles other than Losing My Edge, is Daft Punk is Playing at My House, which is probably hand in hand with Losing My Edge, is probably one of their biggest singles that they ever made. Again, another kind of tongue-in-cheek song, fun dance song that people used to play. And they toured with mainstream indie music channel. We take a look at LCD Soundsystem. From their meteoric rise, especially in the era of the major New York indie bands, we'll see how they broke through, found their own sound, and then right when they were on top after winning multiple Grammy Awards over the years, we're going to see why suddenly they called it quits and what led to them their reunion. And to follow it up, about a year later, they decided to release something else, but it wasn't an album. Rather, it was titled 4533, and it was made for Nike, ran a kind of like an ad to highlight their equipment, especially working with like iPhones and iPads and iPods and so on and so forth, and apps, which were starting to become a thing at the time. And it's kind of funny because the song is actually 45 minutes and 58 seconds long. And it was literally made for people who wanted to run and listen to music. That's why it was made. Their second album was released about 6 months later called Sound of Silver. Again, critics loved it. They got almost 5-star ratings across the board. There was even a digital release which featured covers of songs as well, including a Joy Division cover, another band I really want to talk about later. And they went to tour with Arcade Fire, again, kind of switching it up, getting more people involved with the band. Later on, they were rewarded. Again, before I guess I fast forward, they were rewarded. They had a Grammy nomination again for their album, and tons of music critics just absolutely loved it. I wouldn't say they got a big enough single that they did with their first album, but they were definitely gaining momentum amongst the music scene. However, this is when things start getting interesting, because around the end of 2008, one of their bandmates said, "Hey, I think we're going to be bringing this band to a close pretty soon." That's what I think. But then, not even that long after, a couple of their bandmates, including James, kind of came on and said, no, we're going to be doing great. We're actually going to be releasing an album pretty time soon. They released a couple singles to kind of preview that album. He even said this is going to be better than the first 2 albums that we have done. But then, again, flipping stories once again, James Murphy states that this is going to be the last LCD Soundsystem album ever. They do 2 secret shows with New York City. They really begged fans to not leak the album ahead of time because that was becoming such a huge thing back then. And then they released This Is Happening. Now, in February 8th, 2011, on their website, they said that on April 2nd, at Madison Square Garden in New York City, that they were going to be performing not even at the start of a last tour, they would be performing their very last show. Ironically, the final song at that farewell, quote-unquote, show was New York, I Love You, But You're Bringing Me Down. The show was almost 4 hours long. Arcade Fire was there. Reggie Watts was there. Other bands were there. It was just crazy. And they followed that concert up with a documentary called Shut Up and Play the Hits, which chronicled them pretty much like a couple days before and a little days after of that same concert that I just talked about. Huge DVD. I got to even think about rewatching it because it's been a while. If you haven't seen it, you should, even if you're not a big fan of them. It's really cool to just see them put everything together. And that was it. They stuck true to their word, right? Well, 4 years later, the end of 2015, they come out and release a Christmas song, their first single in 5 years. It was extremely depressing. And James Murphy said that he had been working on that song for years. Decided to get the band back together. And then not even a week later, they said, hey, we're getting back together. And they would be headlining the 2016 of that next year's Coachella Festival. So you went for 4 years, nothing. The band's done to a new single, and then we are going to be performing at one of the biggest festivals of the year. And it continued. They got their venues. They played at Lollapalooza. They played all over New York, Austin city limits. They were just absolutely everywhere. And then they abruptly stopped their tour around August 2016 because they said that they wanted to release new music. And that is exactly what they did. They kind of stopped the tour, and then they immediately went on and started to record new material. And it was great. You know, they did great things. They just kept on going, performed on Saturday Night Live. And their fourth studio album was going to be called American Dream, which was going to be released in September of that year. And they actually won their first ever Grammy for that album and for a song. Now, it wasn't a major Grammy, but I mean, you know, still, to win is still a win. The very next year, starting in about 2020, because that was about the end of 2018, so a little over a year and a half later, well, of course, COVID hits, and James Murphy says, hey, this entire time during COVID, when a lot of bands were kind of getting together and thinking of new music, he said no. They just wanted to get back together when they felt like getting back together. Fast forward all the way in October 2021, they start a residency at a place called Brooklyn Steel for about a month. And a few of their band members started to come and go, started to get a rotating door of lineups as well. They kind of got a cool Amazon feature where they kind of had a parody of themselves being played, which is really funny, really cool as well, including Macaulay Culkin and Christine Coe as well. So that was really cool. And then in the beginning of 2022, they performed on Saturday Night Live and broke with the tradition of playing new music and performed, you know, songs from their debut studio album all the way back then. They even performed in a sketch during that episode as well, and kind of said they were done following that pattern of, you know, work in studio, release album, tour for album, work in studio. They said they just simply wanted a tour. And again, this is the case with a lot of indie bands. I think they reached that stage of they have found their audience. They have a big enough audience, especially in the United States, but even worldwide, that they don't really need to go crazy and release music anymore. They have their fan base. They are confident that they can have enough support to go on tour. And that is currently where we stand with LCD Soundsystem. What do you guys think? Have you guys listened to them? What's your favorite songs? And I will catch you all next week.